Hi, I'm Dr. David Dobson. Welcome to Conversations. Today, my guest is Dr. Hugo Marynissen. Hugo is the co-holder of the Chair of Crisis Governance at the University of Antwerp. He is an expert in crisis governance and risk management. He holds a doctoral degree in management from Cranfield University. Today, we will discuss Hugo's scholarly work on crisis management. It's a pleasure to have you on my show, Hugo.
Well, the pleasure is mine, David. Thank you for inviting.
What is crisis management?
Oh, that's a very good question. Let's first start with what is crisis? What
Yeah.
is crisis? And crisis in terms of organizations who are under crisis.
Mm,
So there are a lot of loads of definitions about crisis. For me, the best definition is that when the survivability of an organization or a part of an organization is
mm,
at stake.
mhm,
So, but we see these days that everyone is using and also misusing the term crisis.
mm,
And
mm,
more and more, everything that happens around us
mm,
is crisis, and it also gives you a sense of urgency, and it
mm,
can be misused.
mhm,
Very often, it is also misused because if there is a crisis, you need exceptional measures
mhm,
to hit the crisis. But
mm,
basically, so crisis is when survivability of an organization or a part of an organization is at
mm,
stake. And then crisis management is everything that has to do with how do you try to manage, turn around, steer if you can steer, but there is
mm,
very little you can really control. But
mhm,
how can you try to anticipate when this survivability of your organization or a part of your organization is at stake? So how can you intervene?
I
So
see.
that's basically the main uh, the main theme of what crisis management can be. And what we see is that more and more, yeah, I don't have to tell you, as we are speaking now,
Yeah.
we have these tremendous fires in California.
Yeah.
We have more and more hurricanes. We have more and more impact
Mm,
from the changing climate, a
mm,
global changing
mm,
climate,
mm,
on not only on our communities, not only on
mm,
our countries, but
mm,
also on businesses.
mm,
So yeah, we just observe that businesses, organizations, societies, they are more and more under crisis,
mm,
under turbulence, as they
mm.
say that. So that's in a nutshell how I would describe crisis and crisis management.
Yeah. I know you mentioned about some of the natural causes like climate change. Can you explain when a crisis occurs within an organization?
Yep. So basically, you can look at the root cause of a crisis, and
Mm,
then typically we can look at what is
mm,
the problem
mm,
that is underlying at the root of a crisis situation.
mm,
And there you can divide the problems in linear
mm,
problems and
mm.
non-linear problems.
Okay.
Linear problems, we can say it's like, well, if you have a fire, if your house is on fire, it's severe.
Mm,
It might in terms of business, it might bring your business into danger, or even the survivability of your business might be in danger
mm.
when your factory is at fire, for instance.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a very linear problem, basically.
Mm,
The fire brigades, they know
mm,
how to deal with it. They are
mm,
trained for this. The
mm,
consequences are not that funny or not
mm,
that nice, but
mm.
basically, so it's a simple, straightforward problem. At the other
Yeah.
side, we have nonlinear problems.
Mm,
And then think about COVID-19. We all went through the
yeah.
pandemic.
Yeah.
So these problems, they are not straightforward. Very
Mm,
often, you don't
mm,
know what the solution is at the beginning of this problem
mm,
before it's solved. And then at the
mm,
end of the day, you can say, now we have a full
mm,
understanding of what
mm,
is actually happening or what
mm,
actually happened
mm.
with this. So these are two types
Yeah.
of crisis. The only thing
Yeah.
we can say, it's
Mm,
not a question if you're gonna have a
mm.
crisis. The question is, when will you have a crisis? So
Yeah.
basically, I think looking at the circumstances these
Mm,
days
mm,
and the type of unstable environment we are operating and working and
Yeah.
living in.
Yeah.
The question is more like, yeah, when will it happen? Because it
Yeah.
can hit every business at
Yeah.
every single moment in time.
Yeah. Yeah. So you raise a very interesting point because we live in a very uncertain environment, and crisis can come from any direction. Like right now, here, some of the chicken farmers facing through the avian flu, for example, and all of
Yep.
a sudden they have to take care of all these the sick birds. So yeah. So I was wondering, are certain types of organizations more vulnerable to a crisis than others?
Well, the answer is no. And sometimes our
Yeah.
starting point was
Yeah.
what is the definition of crisis.
Yeah.
Sometimes I say that my definition is that the crisis is something normal that got out of control.
Mm,
And if you think about, you just
mm,
mentioned like
mm,
the flu,
mm.
um, the Spanish flu
Yeah.
or the bird flu or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Typically, when I listen to experts, medical experts in this field, they say that
Yeah.
on a daily basis,
Mm,
there are multiple new varieties of viruses. And
mm,
in 99.99999 percentage of the cases, this will not cause any harm.
mm,
It's only in this
mm,
0.0000001%
mm, mm,
of the cases that it might turn out into a pandemic. Yeah.
mm,
So then you can say, well, it's something normal, something that every day things are changing. Every day we are operating. Every day we are working together, making mistakes, whatever. And
mm,
in 99% of the cases, everything goes fine and hunky-dory.
mm,
But there is this 0.0001 percentage
mm,
of the cases that
mm,
something might go awfully wrong. Yeah.
mm,
So,
mm,
and then it doesn't matter if you're a big company
mm,
or a small business.
mm,
I think every businesses are prone to, yeah, to get into trouble and to get in a
mm.
crisis situation. And
Yeah.
COVID-19
Yeah.
illustrated this.
Yeah. So I was wondering, why is crisis planning important for an organization?
Oh, I like that question. Thank you for that. Because probably you have seen
Yeah.
this video we produced when we
Yeah.
started our research center at the university.
Mm.
Um, I don't believe in crisis plans, right?
Okay.
But I do believe in planning, as you just mentioned. Right? So it's the act of planning. So
Mm.
sitting together,
Mm.
thinking about what
Mm.
might go wrong,
Mm.
reflecting about this, putting a
Mm.
couple of scenarios on the table, and
Mm.
then say, okay, imagine
Mm.
that, for instance, all
Mm.
computers are out
Yeah.
for the next 5 days. How are we
Yeah.
going to solve this?
Yeah.
Imagine there is no electricity.
Mm.
How might we do this?
Mm.
So, and that's for me more important to have
Mm.
this planning and
Mm.
then make alignments and decide, like, David, what are
Yeah.
you going to do and
Yeah.
who will you alert and what
Yeah.
can I do and how
Yeah.
can we try to solve, to manage this crisis situation,
Mm.
rather than having a plan that you
Mm.
put on a shelf and then
Yeah.
after a while there will be dust on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody's opening this,
Yeah.
even not during a crisis situation.
Yeah.
I've seen multiple real crisis situations where I
Yeah.
was an advisor from big companies to the Prime
Mm.
Minister of Belgium. And they all come in with a crisis manual. They
Yeah.
put it on the table and they
Yeah.
don't open it.
Yeah.
And that's okay as
Yeah.
long as you have this good planning
Mm.
phase,
Mm.
talking about and
Mm.
thinking about how do we organize, how do we
Mm.
coordinate, how do we work together.
Mm.
That's very important.
Yeah.
But for me, and that links to the previous question where you say, are there any specific type of organizations that are
Mm.
prone to?
Mm.
No, every organization. So therefore, I think that a very important
Mm.
lesson for every
Mm.
business is that
Mm.
they have to
Mm.
organize with crisis in mind.
Mm.
They have to
Mm.
organize their business, whether
Yeah.
it's a small one or a
Yeah.
big one,
Yeah.
knowing that one day things will go awfully
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
So, and how do we prepare for that? How
Yeah.
do we organize?
Yeah.
And if we can organize
Yeah.
for the worst,
Mm.
then we are very good in organizing our day-to-day operations, our
Mm.
day-to-day business.
Mm.
So that's not waste of time and energy. So
Yeah.
it's just optimizing your current business, but
Mm.
knowing that something will go
Mm.
awfully wrong one day.
Mm.
So how can we anticipate? How can we
Yeah.
work with this?
Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking about crisis in Canada. Our neighbors from the south, the new administration's saying that they might impose a 25% tariff, and that bringing the whole country into crisis. And obviously, the politicians and the ministers, they try to work on this situation. So
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, who manages this crisis within the organization? Like, is there any department? I know that sometimes like operation management might have something to do with, or there's a specific type of people who working and thinking about all the scenarios.
Well, very good question. And it links back to what I just said. It's organizing with crisis in mind.
Yeah.
I don't believe that you need to have a dedicated crisis manager who's
Okay.
sleeping somewhere on the seventh floor, and the very moment you're in trouble,
They wake
you
up.
wake him or her up, yeah, and then that person has to be responsible for.
Yeah.
No, for me, it's something that within the entire organization,
Mm.
everyone should be aware of
Mm.
and
Yeah.
should be able to switch their
Yeah.
roles and to
Yeah.
switch their mindset
Yeah.
into a mindset of how do we solve this. So it
Yeah.
requires a kind of agility,
Yeah.
kind of flexibility,
Yeah.
knowing that, yeah, things might go wrong. So how do we pick this
Mm.
up? So
Yeah.
I see in some organizations, recently I
Mm.
was in a company
Mm.
um, who on a regular basis,
Mm.
they, the CEO of the company brings together the whole executive team. And then
Mm.
he said, listen, colleagues, imagine this will happen.
Mm.
How do we solve this? And then he
Mm.
takes an example, for
Mm.
instance, from another company or something
Mm.
that he read in the news or
Yeah.
and then just saying,
Yeah.
imagine that we don't have electricity for 36 hours.
Yeah.
How do we manage this?
Yeah.
So, and who's calling who?
Yeah.
Who's running the business? And how
Yeah.
do we do the invoicing? And then
Yeah.
because then we don't have
Yeah.
computers anymore.
Yeah.
And just bringing in this
Yeah.
kind of, I call it sometimes a kind of chronic unease,
Yeah.
but healthy, a healthy touch of chronic unease.
Yeah.
The very moment you sit back and relax and
Mm.
say, hey,
Mm.
everything is under control, it's business as usual, everything is going fine, hmm,
Yeah.
that might be
Yeah.
the very moment
Yeah.
that you're
Yeah.
really in danger. But
Yeah.
now and then, just sitting together and saying, hold on a
Yeah.
second, what if?
Mm. Mm.
And how do we
Yeah.
manage?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then for me, that's everyone in the organization, from the cleaning lady
Mm.
to the
Mm.
CEO in your company
Yeah.
to the president of the board,
Mm.
also there.
Mm.
All these layers, all these levels.
Yeah. 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 Since you're talking about computer, one of the problem most organization face is this cyber attacks and data breach, and that creates the whole problem for the organization and the customers also when the data is out.
Yeah, when, for instance, I don't know if you already saw it in the news, but
Yeah.
since this weekend,
Yeah.
the Technical University of Eindhoven, just
Mm.
it's in the south of the Netherlands,
Mm.
um, they announced that they were hacked,
Mm.
and the whole computer system is out.
Mm.
So today we are on a Monday,
Mm.
so the
Yeah.
university is closed
Yeah.
because they can't operate. And
Yeah.
then now I see in other universities people saying, huh, well, what about our IT system and how
Yeah.
safe is this?
Yeah.
But yeah, we should ask ourselves sometimes
Yeah.
these harsh questions, and
Yeah.
sometimes they are not funny because we know
Yeah.
that your IT is not
Yeah.
100%
Yeah.
bulletproof.
Mm. Mm.
But just saying, oh, everything
Mm.
will be fine is
Mm.
not a solution.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, it's good to be a bit unease
Mm.
and
Yeah.
say, okay, let's think about this and
Yeah.
how can we improve a couple of things.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I just wanted to ask you, Hugo, what brought your interest to this crisis management field?
Um, it was a bit by accident, to be honest. So
Mm.
it's a story from more than 20 years ago.
Okay.
There was a large company here in Belgium,
Yeah.
Fluxys, and Fluxys they do gas transport
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
from the North Sea over
Mm.
Belgium to France, Germany, other
Yeah.
European countries. And they asked a colleague of mine
Mm.
and myself whether
Mm.
we were knowledgeable about crisis management and crisis communication.
Mm.
And in those days, I was mainly working on communication. And I
Mm.
thought, yeah, crisis communication can't be that difficult. It's a bit more exciting and a bit faster. So I'm talking about 20 years ago. So we got
Mm.
ourselves this job. So
Mm.
we said, oh
Mm.
yeah, we are very experienced in this. So
Mm.
no worries. So we
Mm.
started working and preparing
Mm.
then on
Mm.
crisis communication and crisis
Mm.
management, together with
Mm.
a friend of mine who was in
Mm.
the field of crisis management.
Mm.
And then 6 months later, they got the biggest industrial accident since the Second World War here in Belgium.
Mm.
They got the explosion of a high pressure pipeline.
Mm.
More than 20 people were killed instantly.
Mm.
More than 100 people heavily burned. So this was one of the main,
Mm.
biggest
Mm.
disasters,
Mm.
industrial disasters here in Belgium. And I learned very quickly.
Wow.
All of a sudden, I saw
Mm.
everything that was
Mm.
happening in reality.
Mm.
And that was summer 2004. And
Mm.
then I said, well, this is what I really want to do. I want to dive deeper into this. I want to know more about crisis communication, crisis
Mm.
management, and how
Mm.
I can help
Mm.
organizations and businesses.
Mm.
And that was the starting point for me. And then
Mm.
I went back to universities and did
Mm.
a master's in change
Mm.
management and look
Mm.
at how can
Mm.
we change then
Mm.
organizations in the right
Mm.
way. And then afterwards, I did my doctorate in Cranfield,
Yeah.
focusing on the role of how do you communicate about risks in
Yeah.
organizations to make organizations safer.
Yeah.
Um, and then the rest is history.
Yeah. 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 Very nice. Uh, Hugo, you have conducted several collaborative research projects on crisis management, including the one with the Port of Antwerp, Bruges, on the
Yeah,
safety network for critical infrastructure.
yeah,
Could you share a bit about this project?
yeah. So to give you a bit of background, so the port of Antwerp, they merged 2 years ago with the port of Zeebrugge,
Oh,
which is at the
okay.
seaside. So
Okay.
Antwerp, it's as you know, it's
Yeah.
inland,
Yeah. I've been
but
there. It's very
it's
nice.
yeah, I know. That's where we know each other from. Yeah?
Yeah.
So the port of Antwerp, it's the second biggest port in Europe. It's
Yeah.
the second biggest petrochemical cluster in the world.
Mm, mm,
The port of Houston is
mm,
number one, then
mm,
Antwerp, and then Shanghai.
mm,
Um, and they merged 2 years ago with the port of Zeebrugge. So
mm,
now they have that. I think probably it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, port
mm.
in Europe.
Wow.
So we started with research for them
Mhm,
together with the harbor captain,
mm,
Niels van Laar,
mm,
together with the COO of the
mm,
port,
mm,
Rob Smeets. We started with research in 2020
mhm,
during COVID-19. And the whole
mhm,
idea initially was to look at the safety system, the security system of the port of Antwerp, and how can we improve this. And then, so everything was basically okay. We started the first initial interviews, testing interviews to see if the questionnaire was working or not. And then COVID-19 started.
mm,
And it wasn't possible anymore to do interviews. So we were sitting at home, nagging to each other, like, what the hell is going on? And it's just a flu, isn't it? And you
yeah.
know how the
Yeah.
beginning of
Yeah.
these days were.
Yeah.
And then I asked Niels, who was not, so he was the business continuity manager
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
those days.
Yeah.
Since a year, 2 years, he's now the harbor master.
Mm,
And I asked Niels, like, how are you managing this? How are
mm,
you, as your executive team, how are they managing this crisis?
mm, mm,
And he showed me a dashboard of the kind of questions they have, to whom they are
mm,
reaching out, how they are linking with their network. And along with me in that meeting was Stephen van der Noort. I think you also met him before.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
have.
Stephen, he's an expert.
Yeah.
He got his doctorate from our university, and he's
Mm.
an expert on networks, organizational networks.
Okay.
And we said, "Oh, yo, can we research this? Can
Yeah,
That's actual research then?"
yeah.
So we got green light for changing the whole topic and
Mm.
looking at the network and the importance of that network in managing this crisis situation.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and you have to know that if the port of Antwerp was closing or
Mm.
should close during COVID-19, that would have
Mm.
been a disaster, not only
Yeah.
for Belgium, but
Mm.
for a large part of Europe, because
Mm.
a lot of food
Yeah,
and goods were coming
yeah,
through that port.
yeah. All the
And
shipments.
then, yeah,
Yeah,
and then to the entire or big part of Europe.
yeah, yeah.
So we started to look at how are they connecting? Who are they
Mm.
including in their
Mm.
network? How are they
Mm.
steering this network? How
Mm.
do they keep the port open?
Mm.
And the fascinating thing was that the first wave and the first lockdown here in Belgium was from mid-March till about, I think, beginning of May. And then we
Mm.
had a second lockdown, and then during the summer, we went down in 2020, and then in September, October, it started again.
Mm.
The port of Antwerp, they were back in normal operations in the beginning of April.
Wow.
So while everyone was still in
Yeah,
crisis,
yeah.
it was business as usual again for them.
Mm.
And we could see this based
Mm.
on their network, how they were steering this network, and the kind
Mm.
of questions they were, yeah, producing, they were solving,
Yeah,
and how they were doing this. So
yeah,
that was one. If you ask what
yeah,
kind of research, so this is
yeah,
one.
yeah.
It's We published that paper, so you
Mm.
can easily. I will give you the link to the paper so that
Okay.
listeners can
Yeah.
check it and read it if they want.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. So what I gather from this experience, so I think when dealing with this project or issues, so it's a collaborative approach because it's not like a one or two people, but it's like a several people within an organization work together, or maybe like a different areas as well.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So it brought us to this idea that during a crisis, typically there is this idea that you need one big leader who will
Mm,
who will
yeah.
get
Take
you
it through.
through the crisis.
Yeah.
But basically, we don't need one big leader. We need
Mm,
multiple leaders who can
yeah.
collaborate, who can
Yeah.
work together with each other from
Yeah.
multiple companies
Yeah.
and can put aside
Yeah.
the competition for a
Yeah.
moment and just say,
Yeah.
okay, we are together in this misery.
Mm,
So how can we solve this together?
mm,
So
yeah.
that network approach in crisis management is a really
Mm,
important one.
mm, nice. Hugo, currently you are the co-holder of the Chair of Crisis Governance at University of Antwerp. Tell us
Yep.
about your work there.
Okay. Maybe I have to explain a little bit what a chair is because it's not so well known in the US
Yeah.
and in Canada.
Yeah.
Um, a chair is like a center of expertise
Mm,
within the university.
okay.
So it's a kind of research center, and typically
Mm,
what we do within a chair is that we
mm,
do research, of
mm,
course, on the
mm,
topic of crisis governance.
mhm,
Second, what we do is dissemination of knowledge, and that can be in courses, can be in lectures, can be
mm,
in sessions that we organize or conferences, that kind
mhm.
of stuff. And then the third pillar is what we call support to society,
Okay.
and that can be everything. So,
Okay.
for instance, I was as an expert,
Mm,
external expert to the Parliamentary Commission,
mm,
advising the Parliamentary Commission that was researching how Belgium was dealing with
mm,
COVID-19,
mhm,
for instance.
mm.
So that's giving your knowledge and expertise to society or to other businesses or organizations. So these are the three things that we are doing
Okay.
in this chair.
Mm,
And we started last year,
mm,
September 23.
mm.
And typically, also a chair is funded by companies or organizations. So
Okay.
we are very proud that we have the Port of Antwerp Bruges,
Mm-hmm.
who's supporting us.
Mm.
Next to them, the Fire Brigade of
Mm.
Antwerp,
Nice.
and together with them, the City of Antwerp, because they're
Mm.
part of the city.
Mm.
The third company is PM. It's a
Mm.
consultancy firm. It's also
Mm.
a firm that I started 20 years ago together with
Nice.
a business partner.
Okay.
And then the fourth since this month, so that's brand new news.
Okay.
It's not officially announced yet, but I can
Okay.
officially announce it here.
Nice.
Is Brussels Airport Company.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
So Brussels Airport Company also
Mm.
stepped in as
Mm.
a fourth partner to the chair,
Wonderful.
which is really
Yeah.
important, I
Yeah.
think, to have,
Yeah.
because it's a hub, a big economical hub in
Yeah.
Belgium, and not only
Yeah.
in Belgium but also for Europe, together
Yeah.
with the Port of Antwerp,
Yeah.
Bruges. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Hugo, you have worked over 2 decades in the field of crisis governance. So, where do you see the future of crisis management headed?
Oh, I that's I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I had.
Mm.
But I don't. Uh, I see that in the first place, I see that there has been a lot of maturity over the last 2 decades.
Mm.
If I see how businesses, organizations,
Yeah.
both public and private organizations, were dealing with crisis and crisis management 20
Yeah.
years ago, and today, well, there is a lot of maturity. I think
Yeah.
they learned a lot.
Yeah.
The sense of knowledge and the sense of urgency is
Mm.
there. So
Mm.
that's, thank God
Yeah.
that we are that far already.
Yeah.
Um, so a lot of professionalism, but still there is room for more, I think.
Mm.
And I think we have to go in a way that there is this good, healthy balance between running your business, running your organization, but at the same time also having in the back of your mind this knowledge that something might go wrong. So, and
Mm.
how do we deal with that? How can we prepare? And how can we put in our day-to-day operations, day-to-day practice, this sense of urgency to make
Mm.
sure that we deal with it when it arises. That's one thing.
Mm. Mm.
Second thing that personally is frightening me a little bit is the polarization, increase of
Mm.
polarization that we see in
Mm.
society.
Mm.
And that together linked with misbelief. And then I
Mm.
quote Dan Ariely, who wrote a wonderful book about
Mm.
misbelief. It's
Misinformation.
a misinformation,
Yeah.
conspiracy
Yeah.
theories, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The way we put things in black and white
Mm.
more and more,
Mm.
and that there is little room for nuance. There is little room
Mm.
for respect for
Mm.
authority, respect for if I look, for instance, here, I don't know how it is in Canada and North America,
Mm.
but I see, for instance, here during New Year's Eve,
Mm.
there were riots
Yeah.
in Brussels and Antwerp where the youngsters they were attacking ambulances, firefighters, policemen, and I think,
Mm.
wow, they are just there to help you to do
Mm.
their job to help people in need.
Yeah.
So you don't attack them. So
Mm.
and I think that's a trend that is a bit worrying.
Mm.
So I really hope that we might turn that trend
Yeah.
and go back to the right way. And maybe
Mm.
yes, I do believe in it because I see that there is more maturity and more professionalism in
Mm.
dealing with uncertainty and dealing with crisis situations
Mm.
and the like. So yeah, I'm positive on that.
Yeah. Well, it's always
But we have to
really,
be aware of it.
yeah, 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 yeah. Thank you for your time, Hugo, and best wishes on the important work you do.
I thank you very much for giving me this platform, and I look forward to welcome you again in Antwerp or maybe somewhere else on this beautiful globe.